And good evening, everyone. We want to thank you for joining us today. We're going to have a discussion about the zoning for adult use cannabis, recreational use cannabis licensing today. As many of you know, the City Council, the City of Detroit, approved the licensing ordinance for adult use back in the last Tuesday of November 2020, last year. Since then, we've been working steadfast in identifying how do we make sure that we zone these facilities properly. Just about a month or so ago, there was a City Planning Commission meeting that went, I want to say, about 5 hours. And you'll hear some of the questions, concerns regarding that particular meeting. In addition to that, we have joining us today Mr. George Etheridge, who is a city planner and a policy analyst for the City Council. And he was the gentleman who shepherded that, I think it was about 5.5 hour meeting, George, is that about right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, and we thank you for your service, and thank you for everything that you've done and will be doing regarding that. I just want to let everyone who's present today know that today we're here to discuss zoning. Not licensing, not any of these other issues. Today is about zoning. And why is it important today? Well, it's important today because we actually have the public hearing that's going to take place in the Planning and Economic Development Standing Committee just a few days from now on the 11th. And that's going to take place where you will have an opportunity to officially provide your voice to this issue of zoning regarding adult use. Again, that is going to take place on the 11th, that's Thursday, at the Planning and Economic Development Standing Committee. It's going to be a short opportunity. It's a short meeting. It starts at 10 o'clock. The meeting starts at 10, so make sure you're there waiting to provide comment, if you have any, on this upcoming Thursday, the 11th. And so with that being said, we also want you to know that there are ways that you still can get some of your questions answered regarding licensing. Rich, can you throw that slide back up again? So we got two ways that you can get your questions answered about licensing. And some of you are sending emails and questions and concerns to me. We're going to work through them as best as we can, but that portion is now handed over to the CREO department and the Detroit Means Business. And on your screen right now is a email. And some of you have been emailing them. They've been telling me they got about 100 or so emails per day they've been receiving. And so please bear with them. They did indicate that for the phone number, which is brand new, it's going to be operational as of tomorrow. And they have a helpline for those who have been saying, look, I'm trying to find somebody to talk to. I need a real body to talk to, not just an email. Well, I would say use both. Use both. Email homegrown@detroitmi.gov, as well as the telephone number that's going to be manned with individuals who can answer your questions. They say give them at least 48 hours to respond to your questions, again, because of the heavy load of calls and emails that they have been receiving, that we all have been receiving. So please be patient, but get your questions in as soon as you can so that it's not at the last minute. All right, you can clear that one off, Reg. Mr. Etheridge, again, thank you for joining us. I know City Planning Commission last month had a long public hearing regarding the zoning aspect of adult use. You gave a presentation, you did a tremendous job in doing so, made it real clear and understandable. So we asked if you could come today and provide that same information to those who are tuning in now. They probably didn't have a chance to see the City Planning Commission meeting last month. If you can then talk about what takes place next. So the process, what takes place next. It was approved by the City Planning Commission, is now with council. Just kind of walk folks through what's on the table and the next steps, please.
Absolutely. So last month on the 28th, the City Planning Commission voted. It wasn't unanimous. They did vote 7-2 to approve the proposed text amendment for the zoning regulations for adult use marijuana. Now it's before your honorable body. Your colleagues have had an opportunity to review the ordinance and review staff's report, along with our recommendation approving the zoning regulations. On this coming Thursday at 10:05, we will have a brief uh, public hearing on the matter. And again, I'll try to make my presentation as succinct as possible. So I appreciate today, because this is kind of a dry run. When I presented before the commission on the 28th, the presentation itself ran an hour. So I got the abridged version, but still with all of
We're gonna go a little shorter today, George.
Absolutely. I got my 15-minute timer set. So still have all of the vital information. Just touch on background a little bit, but primarily go over the major changes, what's allowed. And I know that the community is particularly keen on where these facilities can locate. So that'll be really where our focus. After council's public hearing on Thursday, the following Tuesday, the ordinance should be advanced to the committee of the whole, in which your colleagues will have an opportunity to vote either in support or opposition to the proposed text amendment. Council will have a week to reconsider, unless there's a motion for reconsideration, which means that it immediately goes to the mayor, as opposed to letting it marinate for a week or so. Once the mayor has it in, he'll have the opportunity to either sign off on it or veto. And if it's a veto, it goes back to council. If not, then it's advanced by the city clerk and published. The city's method of publishing is the legal news. 8 days after publication is when the text amendment goes into effect. So we're looking to have all of this done ahead of the April 1st application period opening for those legacy applicants. So that's where we are in terms of timeline.
All right. So you just, and I'm sure if we could touch that again after your presentation, so that people remain refreshed on what's next. But feel free to share your slides, and
Absolutely.
the floor is yours, sir.
Thank you. I truly appreciate that. And hopefully you are seeing what I am seeing in terms of our screen. So again, we're here to talk about medical marijuana as well as adult use marijuana, which would be the two new land uses permitted within the city of Detroit. In terms of background, for those that are new to this conversation, medical marijuana has legally been permissible within the state of Michigan since 2008. That's when legislation was first introduced. Within that time, we saw what many have referred to as the Wild Wild West in terms of retail facilities popping up throughout the city of Detroit. At its height, we had 214 unlicensed and unregulated facilities within the city of Detroit that were operating under what was allowed by the Medical Marijuana Act of 2008. All that act did was establish a relationship between a caregiver who could grow up to 12 plants for a patient, a maximum of 5 patients, and a patient, meaning that you had to have the prescription from a doctor with a particular ailment stating that medical cannabis would be beneficial for you. In 2010, residents within the city of Detroit put forward a ballot initiative to allow for the legal possession and consumption of 1 ounce or less of marijuana within the city of Detroit. That got tied up in the courts for 2 years. It was successfully on the ballot again in 2012, with 67% of Detroiters that voted in that election voting in support of legal possession and consumption of recreational marijuana within the city. In 2015, the city of Detroit again attempted to regulate what was happening within our boundaries, the 214 unregulated facilities that were dispensing marijuana. So under the leadership of Councilman Tate, we crafted the Medical Marijuana Caregiver Facility, which allowed those licensed caregivers to establish commercial facilities and legally dispense marijuana to their registered patients. In 2016, the state of Michigan started to move the ball further along and came up with the Medical Marijuana Facilities Licensing Act, which allowed for 5 distinct licenses: growers, processors, secure transporters, safety compliance facilities, and provisioning centers, essentially dispensaries. In 2018, the city officially opted in and came up with zoning regulations to allow those 5 licenses within the city of Detroit. That same year, the state of Michigan voted in support of the legalization of and taxation for adult use or recreational marijuana, which brings us to this point. So the ordinance, which will be considered by the city council on Thursday, essentially touches these 6 different articles of the zoning ordinance. The zoning ordinance is the document which governs all of the land uses within the city of Detroit. It says what can go where, what can't go where, and establishes specific use standards and regulations for those particular uses. So we're looking at revising the review and decision-making bodies. We're looking at amending the section which dealt previously with medical and adult use provisions. We're looking at the use table, the general use standards and specific use standards, parking, and definitions. So again, under Article 3, Division 12, this was what lays out the framework for how medical marijuana and recreational marijuana facilities in the city would operate. And again, this section has been revised again in 2015, 2018, and now 2021, looking to do away with the old model of caregiver centers, and again, allowing the 5 licenses for medical as well as the permissible licenses for adult use. So definitions is a large part of what's being amended, and I'm going to try to breeze through this section. And for the most part, what's been amended has been the spelling of marijuana. Within the state of Michigan in 2015, we were spelling marijuana with an H. And again, that was specific to medical marijuana. But now that adult use marijuana is a part of this discussion, we're going to the more traditional spelling of marijuana with a J. So a lot of the definitions are either correcting the spelling or making references to what's permissible under the state law. So MRTMA, which you probably heard a lot of, is the Michigan Regulations and Taxation of Marijuana Act, and then the MMFLA, which is the Licensing Act. So you'll hear those terms. So MRTMA is adult use, MMFLA is medical. But again, inserting those specifics into the definitions. We speak to co-location, cleaning up those definitions, meaning that the landscape has changed. You can have medical as well as adult use at one location. That's permissible. I'll get into accessory uses, which is not permissible a little later in the presentation. The co-location of marijuana facilities is permissible. Cultivation and or cultivate, again, dealing with the growing of it. One new use, which is being introduced as a part of the 2018 legislation, is adult use designated marijuana consumption establishments. So these are facilities where marijuana can be consumed, either smoked, drank, eaten in terms of edibles, consumables, and this is a new use. Drug-free zones, this definition has been amended as opposed to what was previously on the books. We ran into a lot of concern from building safety and engineering, who does all of the reviews, making sure that these facilities meet the spacing requirements from sensitive uses in order to be licensed. The amendment for drug-free zone has been amended by specifying for outdoor recreation that does not include parkways or park lots. Now, in terms of parkways and park lots, what that is, they are essentially green belts, areas where there's trees, there's a thin 10-foot wide strip of land that's adjacent to more than likely some type of industrial use. It's a buffer area that is within the inventory of general services, but it's not utilized by the public for passive or active recreational activities. So that's why those uses of parkway and park lot specifically are being recommended to be removed from drug-free zone. And then we talk about equivalent licenses. So again, all of this information and this draft ordinance is available on the City Planning Commission's website. If you want to read in great detail about each of these different definitions and what they allow for. But again, equivalent licenses. If you're currently licensed for processing under MMFLA, the comparable or equivalent license would be a processing license for adult use under MERPA. And the same is true for the other licenses. Expanding the definition of what a licensee is, again, correcting the spelling of marijuana to the traditional with a J. Same applies for grower facilities. Another new use is micro business. So micro businesses are all inclusive. They grow, they process, and they sell all from the same facility. Now, the catch with this one is you're limited to 150 plants. That's your maximum capacity that the state will allow for a micro business. And under our zoning scheme, we are looking to allow these in your more traditional neighborhoods. We have found that under the old regime of things where growers were the only game in town, they were limited by state statutes to either agricultural or industrial areas. We don't have agricultural areas in the city. However, we do have industrial, and those industrial parcels are going at a premium. So to make this land use more accessible to your everyday run-of-the-mill legacy Detroit applicant, we did open up the land use areas where this would be allowed. So we are looking at your B2, which is your local business residential districts, and your B4, your general business districts, along your major and secondary thoroughfares to allow micro businesses to locate. Other definitions, again, processor, updating those with references to MMFLA and MERTMA, retail establishment, provisioning center, safety compliance facility. Again, updating all of these definitions, either with the spelling and with references to the new state laws, as well as, again, the spelling of medical marijuana in and of itself, as well as caregiver centers. So, and that definition is being stricken. So again, medical marijuana caregiver center, which was a creation of the city in 2015, that landscape has changed. We're striking that use. It's no longer a permissible use, no longer defined. And then again, medical marijuana facilities. And again, updating references to changes in state law, making it mesh well. So under the section for medical marijuana caregiver centers, again, that whole section in essence is being stricken. The review board, which used to review all of the applications for every use, that's been stricken from the section, and it's been replaced with a licensing board under the licensing ordinance, allowing how they're reviewed, how they're licensed, how they're established. All of that language is being stricken because, again, medical marijuana caregiver centers is no longer a valid use within the city. What is permissible and what's being updated are the use regulations for what is allowed. So we've got designated consumption establishments, grower facilities, micro business, processors, retail and provisioning centers, safety compliance facilities, and secure transporters. All of these uses remain conditional uses. What's new to the list, again, are your micro business as well as consumption establishments. But as always, it's a conditional land use. And that means that occupants, residents, property owners within 300 feet of any establishment looking to establish one of these uses will receive notice by first-class mail. There will be posted notice on the property, informing everyone of the hearing date and time that this request is coming before the Special Land Use Board, before Building Safety and Engineering. So you'll have an opportunity to weigh in, express your concerns, your opposition, or your support for any of these uses looking to establish in your community. Again, new to that list are designated consumption establishments as well as micro business. Provisions that still remain in place to protect the community are, as they've always been, drug-free zones. Again, Detroit, we have our own specific definition for a drug-free zone, and then there's your federal definition for a drug-free zone, which are triggered by schools. So schools cast a 1,000-foot shadow, libraries, parks, playgrounds, public housing, recreational facilities, all cast a 1,000-foot shadow. Gateway radio thoroughfares, as well as traditional Main Street overlay areas, are also prohibited from housing these types of establishments for retail purposes. No use is allowed in your traditional Main Street overlay area. However, on the Gateway radio thoroughfare, micro businesses are not allowed. Provisioning centers and or retail establishments are not allowed. Consumption establishments are not allowed on the Gateway radio thoroughfares. However, if you're growing, processing, transporting, or doing safety compliance, you are allowed to locate on the Gateway radio thoroughfare. Other safeguards that are in place are the 1,000-foot zoning or buffer from religious institutions that are tax exempt. Now, there is a catch to that one. That only applies to religious facilities that are tax exempt by the city assessor's office. If you are on a border community and there's a church across the major thoroughfare, that church and that other municipality does not cast a 1,000-foot shadow. However, if there's a religious institution within the city of Detroit, it does. And then if there's another facility that's already licensed or has some level of approval, they cast a 1,000-foot shadow for retail, consumption, and or micro business. When it comes to accessory uses, they are not allowed for medical or recreational marijuana facilities. That means you can't have a gas station and have a medical marijuana or recreational marijuana business within that location. You can't have a restaurant with a marijuana related use in that facility. That is considered a public nuisance. Again, as I stated earlier in the presentation, facilities are allowed to co-locate with other marijuana facilities, provided that they meet the licensing requirements laid out by the state, because there are some licenses that aren't compatible. Here is a map of the traditional Main Street overlay areas. Again, traditional Main Street overlay does not allow for any of the medical or adult use marijuana uses, period. So if you are located within one of these corridors or looking to locate in one of these corridors, that use is not allowed. If you're a member of a neighborhood association and you want to know, okay, what are the sacred cows? What is absolutely, prohibited from locating these facilities? This map, again, is available on our site. This is the traditional Main Street overlay area. Those areas that are in purple are newly added. So this was done, I believe, in October of last year. City Council added new traditional Main Street overlay areas, not solely to prohibit marijuana-related industries, but to allow additional development along these corridors as well. So again, the use table spells out what is permitted. Again, just to reiterate, consumption establishments, grower facilities, micro business, processors, retail and or provisioning centers, safety compliance, and secure transporters are allowed, but again, all on a conditional basis. And then this, we're a belt and suspenders kind of city. So multiple times throughout the ordinance, we speak to the regulations, where things are allowed and where they are not allowed. So this is another section which speaks to the spacing requirements when it comes to these types of uses. How far you have to be away from another like facility, how far away you have to be from a controlled use like a liquor store, how far away you have to be from a sensitive use such as a church or a drug-free zone. All of that, again, is spelled out and reiterated time and time again throughout the zoning ordinance. of marijuana facilities and adult use establishments. Further, again, belt and suspenders. There are several sections in which we speak to these safeguards for the community and for these sensitive uses in terms of spacing. Again, temporary use is not something that's permissible when it comes to marijuana uses. You can't ask for a temporary use permit for a pop-up facility. You must be a permanent brick and mortar type facility licensed by both the city of Detroit and the state of Michigan in order to operate. And then as it relates to parking standards, adding the new uses of consumption establishments as well as micro business, we have parking as a requirement. So you can't be in a storefront on a street where there is no parking. We know that there are many commercial corridors within the city of Detroit that don't have ready parking. There's only on-street parking. If your facility or a facility only has on-street parking, that is not permissible. So that's one parking space per 200 square feet that's required for retail facilities. But if you're consumption, grower, processor, safety compliance, or secure transporter, you need 2 parking spaces per 3 employees, or one for every 800 square feet that you have in your facility, whichever is fewer. And then again, these are all of the definitions that are added to the definition section of the zoning ordinance. Again, clearly defining what these particular uses are. And I will gladly take any questions.
All right, we appreciate you, George, with that presentation. I know, folks, that was a lot of information in a very short period of time. The good news is everyone will have an opportunity to ask questions regarding the zoning. And we're going to make sure that you have the information on how to do so. So if you're on telephone, you can raise your hand by pressing *9, and we will take your question there. If you're on a computer, if you're on a Windows computer, you'll tap Alt plus the letter Y. If you're on an Apple's computer, you will hit Option plus the letter Y to raise your hand. Again, if you're on a telephone, you will press *9 to raise your hand. If you're on a Windows computer, it is Alt plus the letter Y. And if you're on an Apple computer, it is Option plus the letter Y. Now it looks like, Georgia, sounds like we got a couple of questions already. Are you all set?
I'm set.
All right. Yelena, good evening. How are you today?
Good evening, Councilman. Good evening, George. I am doing well.
Good.
And the boards are lit up. We have 21 hands raised, and there was a few folks that had their hands right from the jump. So I will get to them first.
Okay, let's get into it.
All right. Our first person is Yetunde, and okay, did he raise his hand? I think he just lowered his hand.
But he's in.
Oh, he's in? Okay.
Yeah, he's in.
Okay.
Yetunde?
Yes. How are you?
Oh, my apologies.
Shoot.
Good evening.
Good evening. Good evening. It was a lot of information to take in indeed. I have to go back over some of those details, but I was wondering about the expansion of the designated area for grow facilities. And I've been looking at the maps and the areas that have already been presented to us, and it's obvious it's not enough land use available at this particular time for the amount of licenses that are likely to come in. So I was wondering what is planned in terms of an expansion for places and facilities or land use that growers will be able to use.
Yeah,
Okay.
George, go ahead. I'll let you go, then I'll.
Sure. So there's no limit on the number of grower facilities within the city of Detroit. If you're able to find land in an industrial area, there's no spacing requirement. The only prohibition is that a grow facility cannot be within a drug-free zone, but it can be next to a processor, a secure transporter, provisioning facility. There just is a prohibition of it locating within a drug-free zone. as it relates to the micro business, the mom and pop shops that have to be all inclusive, there is a limit of 35 licenses that's written into the licensing ordinance for that. But again, those can locate along your major or secondary thoroughfares, provided that, again, they meet those spacing requirements.
And I just want to add as well, I know that there is a lot of folks who say there's not enough land. I get it. It is very challenging. I totally understand. But what we have out there in terms of the spacing requirements have become something that is, for the most part, with a lot of Detroit, has been very popular because, as many of you recall, when it was as George said, and he's quoting what many have said, it was the Wild Wild West prior to us having ordinances in place that left a really, really bad taste in a lot of people's mouths within the neighborhood. So reducing, and from some saying that they want to eliminate the zoning requirements is just not a possibility. And we had a number of issues that we had to address concerning the Board of Zoning Appeals providing waivers to businesses that were right across the street from each other, and created an issue in the neighborhood. We had business owners who were upset as well. So that is no longer an option for a waiver for variance in the Board of Zoning Appeals. Now, what I will say is that the city did go through and scrub the land and the properties in the city of Detroit. And as I mentioned, our goal was to try to find, how do we get additional space without changing the spacing setbacks, if you will, and the zoning requirements. So in terms of parks, and we know parks is a prohibition, it's been a prohibition for some, there are currently 246 active parks in the city of Detroit that potentially will serve as a barrier for an entity that's looking to establish their marijuana related business there. What we did was we scrubbed down the information that we had and found out a number of these parks, 49 of the parks prior to the number of 246, 49 of them really was just a piece of land that had no infrastructure, we weren't doing anything as a city addressing them, wasn't maintaining them properly. So those parks were removed from the list. So now what we have, again, is 246 active parks that will potentially serve as a barrier for a marijuana-related business to exist there. But 49 parks or park spaces were removed. Same thing when it comes to closed schools. We know that educational institution, just if it was zoned for an educational institution, was a barrier. Well, we removed that as well. Unless that school is open and operational, then it does not qualify as a element that could potentially zone you out, if you will. So there were 43 locations across the city that were removed that way. And then lastly, churches. We know we got a lot of churches in the city of Detroit. Prior to where we were before they scrubbed down the information. Of course, let me just say this, churches must have tax exempt status to qualify to be a quote unquote potential barrier for a business to a marijuana related establishment to locate there. Currently, we have 1,581 locations in the city of Detroit that have tax exempt status that would qualify. These are the churches. What we did was we removed those entities that did not have tax exempt status, because that is clearly expressed in our code that you have to have that. And that means that we removed 3,920 locations within the city of Detroit. These are churches that did not have tax exempt status. So we will continue to address, in the short term at least, those areas where we would be able to address certain zoning restrictions. But at this moment, there's no contemplation, and there's no appetite, quite honestly, to remove the zoning restrictions of 1,000 feet away from those locations that are mentioned in our ordinance. So I just wanted to put that on the record. All right, Yelena, who do we have next?
Mitzi Ruddock.
Mitzi, and before we go to Mitzi, George, what's the City Planning Commission's website? I know you mentioned that folks can go on the website to get this information that you provided. Talk to us about where can folks get that website? Where can they go to access the website?
Absolutely. The city's website is detroitmi.gov. You can click on government, and then you want to click on commissions, and it'll pop right up with City Planning Commission. So you can click on there, and the most recent draft of this ordinance is on that side.
All right. Thank you, George. Missy, thank you for joining us. Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you so much. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
All righty. Thank you so much for having this meeting so we can get clarification on a much needed conversation. Zoning is the biggest question that I get. I'm representing a lot of Detroit legacy applicants looking forward to moving forward in this industry to become owners. They are making a great sacrifice. They're paying this $100 up front, $6,000 pre-qualification with the state, and then finding themselves, in a place where they are unable to find property to move forward in the opportunity of the cannabis industry. And with that being said, this huge price to pay, I'm asking for some level of consideration for that, and making sure or ensuring that we get a lot of, not all, we know everybody's not going to be able to get through the process, but that Detroit legacy applicants have a real shot at ownership in this industry. So a couple of solutions that I have are one, is it possible to get a payment portal similar to on the medical side, to be able to issue letters in regards to if this property is good to go, or if it's, I know you all have the links on the website, but I'm already hearing that they are not accurate. So being able to get some more accuracy in regards to these buildings would definitely help Detroit legacies who are already coming from a disproportionately advantaged perspective. And then also eliminating or lowering the spatial requirements for liquor stores. We are in competition already with Chaldeans. If we're talking about ownership for Detroiters and for liquor stores to have preference over our opportunity to become owners in this billion-dollar industry, I am definitely asking you all to please reconsider that spatial requirement specifically for liquor stores. Also, also one other thing is that I am hearing something about Eastern Market being able to be rezoned in order for them to be able to have licensing. So once again, for these Detroit legacy applicants, that'll be just a slap in the face to watch them get a rezoning. But these individuals who are working hard and have sacrificed for this industry are unable to move forward in their pursuit for this industry as well. And one last thing is that these restrictions also can cause higher prices per square feet for Detroit legacy. So I just want you all to have that on your minds as you all move forward in these decisions on zoning. Thank you.
Thank you. Don't go yet, Missy. Just got a couple of questions. So the payment portal you indicated, I'll have to get some additional details on how you would expect that to work. Because I know you mentioned that you wanted to work similar to how it works on the medical marijuana side.
So you can pay $80, I believe, on the medical side, and zoning will issue a letter in regards to whether your property is approved in that particular area.
She's referring to a zoning verification letter that Building Safety and Engineering produced to verify zoning for any property in the city.
Yeah, and part of the reason why it was placed on the website, the zoning it wasn't an actual zoning verification. We tried to eliminate that aspect of folks having to pay $80 on the front end. But the zoning portal is still available for those who do want to pay to get that. I will also say that you mentioned that the accuracy of some of the locations on the website is not where it should be. There have some accuracy issues. Please let us know location if you have any. I know I've kind of heard, but I haven't been able to identify a location. No one's
Okay.
provided me with the location. If you have them, let me know so that we can go in and, because as you know, council, we're not the ones who manage any of this portion of it. We did the actual ordinance and the legislation portion. So let me know that, and we'll find that out as well. George, it looks like you had something you wanted to add to that.
I was going to speak to the Eastern Market concern.
And that's where we were going next. And I just want to let you know as well that we were approached by actually 2 sets of legacy Detroiters who are trying to get that change in the Eastern Market. But George, if you can provide some insight on that, please, for.
Absolutely. So the zoning that you're referencing, it's been part of a 3-year study plan for the Eastern Market area to rezone and create a new designation referred to as market. Now, within that zoning classification, none of the marijuana-related uses are listed. What's been asked from those within the Eastern Market District is a waiver from the spacing requirements for controlled uses such as liquor stores, schools, and churches. Because as it now stands, given the 4 churches, the 2 liquor stores, and the school that are in and around the market, they all cast a 1,000-foot shadow and nothing's allowed within the market at this point. So they're asking for waivers on those land uses, and they're asking for waivers for parking. But the proposed text amendment that you're referencing doesn't allow for any marijuana use within the Eastern Market District.
And just like all the rest of them, we're going to continue to evaluate and see if that's something that works on behalf of the city. But as of right now, that is not a part of what's being contemplated on the 11th. All right. Thanks again, Mitzi. And let's make sure we stay in touch regarding those properties that you've been told have been made inaccurate. Yelena, do we have another caller?
Yes, Ruth Johnson.
Ruth Johnson, thank you for joining us. Good evening.
Good evening, Ruth Johnson from Community Development Advocates of Detroit. Thank you so much. This has been very informative, but I have to say it's overwhelming. I'm trying to get my head wrapped around all this. And
welcome to my world.
But I have some suggestions because, you know, I'm the suggestor.
Yes, ma'am.
I appreciate Mr. Etheridge giving his timeline, and then you ask him to do it again. Can we just have it printed up? And have it posted somewhere available to the public, as well as Mr. Etheridge's slides. I know he was trying to go through them quickly and I didn't catch everything, as well as providing information in layperson's language. My counterpart, Yolanda Jackson, she has the Masters of Urban Planning. I do not. And I don't even get all the terminology, even though I do appreciate the definition of terms in the ordinance itself. So just consider those suggestions, and just know there's a high level of interest among Detroiters, especially my CDAD members and partners. So I would also encourage, and I know this is time consuming, but I think it's time well spent, if you can repeat having these informational sessions. I have some specific questions that I will pose, but I'm also open to having further conversation with Mr. Etheridge or whoever I need to have discussion with to help me and others understand this stuff. My first is about the spacing and proximity to other controlled uses. I'm trying to figure out, does that involve like drug or psychiatric treatment facilities, drug addiction or psychiatric treatment facilities, group homes for people with various mental health disorders, any of the assessment centers. But I'm also concerned about changes. There could either be zoning changes or changes because either a school wants to open or has opened, or some type of facility or activity that is covered either under federal or city drug-free zone opens or close. How do we deal with if there's a licensee activity facility and then things change, or even if there's a zoning change that now allows something? And I'm just concerned about that. So that's one set of questions. I did hear Mr. Etheridge.
before we go there, George, can you give her some responses? Because you got a lot for us. We want to make sure.
Absolutely, absolutely. So in regards to your spacing questions about the pharmacies and group homes and the like, those are not a part of the spacing requirements. It's a finite list of those controlled uses. So arcades, pool halls, billiards halls, and beer, wine, and liquor stores. Those are those controlled uses that cast the 1,000-foot shadow. In terms of if a new use, which would cast a shadow, were to establish within proximity to a use, that would not preclude that use from continuing. That property owner has the legal right for the quiet enjoyment of their property, regardless if a religious institution and or a school were to open within proximity.
Where would I find, thank you for that. Where would I find a list of those controlled uses or facilities that are covered under either the city or the federal drug-free zone? I'm not familiar with where to find that.
Both of which can be found in the zoning ordinance. There's a specific section as it relates to controlled uses, and it defines them in the zoning ordinance, which is a searchable document on Municode. So if you were to go to just your Google search, type in Municode Detroit.
And George, that's MUNI for those who
Yes.
are not familiar. MUNICODE. That's Muni Code. George.
Municode, so Muni, short for municipal code. And you can search for controlled uses there, and that complete list is there. And the other list that you were referencing, I'm sorry, if you could repeat that.
I'm going to have to, this is too much, so I'm just going to reach out to you, George. I'm sorry. And then the other thing about the removal of, you mentioned, or maybe member Tate mentioned park areas, schools, churches. I feel that is problematic during a pandemic. I don't know how they were noticed about their removal or if given any opportunity to appeal it, because I would not imagine a church would think, I need to file and be registered with the tax assessor so that I won't have a marijuana facility next to me. That would not come up in my mind.
Well, you would actually should be doing that on the front end if you're actually a church. So that's not a requirement to as a barrier. That's one of the requirements to be tax exempt as a church. But George, it looks like you were jumping in about to answer that question.
Absolutely. I was going to say, I'm glad you actually raised that, because that's actually addressed in this draft of the ordinance when it speaks to closures, barring, the current pandemic, as well as any other future occurrence which may happen, which results in a facility temporarily closing their doors. So we did take that into consideration in this draft when speaking to closed facilities.
Okay, I'm going to follow up with you because I didn't get that. The traditional Main Street overlay, is 8 Mile included?
Yep, Ms. Ruth, this has got to be your last one because we got 25 hands up. So
Okay.
we want to make sure we get through all of them as
A
best
lot of residential areas along 8 Mile are looking for some relief. Is the traditional Main Street overlay apply to 8 Mile?
No, 8 Mile is not a traditional Main Street overlay area.
All right. Thank you so much. All right, so folks, we're gonna, because we do have so many people who are calling in or who have questions, raising their hand right now. We got 25 currently on Zoom. We have some on Facebook as well, and then some in the chats. We're gonna have to move all of our questions pretty quickly. So everyone will have about a minute to ask your question. I apologize for that. But again, we wanna make sure that we hit as many questions as possible, especially for those folks who've had their hands up for quite some time. So we're gonna ask you to ask your question, and we're gonna remove you off the screen, and either I or George will answer that question that you have. All right, Yelena, who's our next caller?
Galaxy Tab A.
Galaxy Tab A, please go ahead with your question, and then after you ask it, we'll remove you, and then we'll begin to answer your question. Galaxy Tab A, are you there?
Hi, James. I needed to know something. I've been trying to follow along and find the different, I wanted to see the map. And I was also trying to go into the Muni code. Will you set up something later on, after the meeting, where we can go in and actually see these things?
So what we'll do is we'll work to get, so you're looking for the Muni code. So we'll get that Muni code email address. Reggie, and I know you're working on something. Can you please put something together with the Muni code information on it? Again, George, what's that address again? Muni code what?
So it's municode.com. But the easiest way to do it is do Municode Detroit in your Google search or in your search bar, and it'll come right up for you.
All right. It's actually now in the chat for those who are looking online. Galaxy Tab, was that your only question? All right. So we're gonna have to move on to the next caller. Yelena, who's our next caller?
Our next caller is Patrick Linzau.
Patrick Linzau. Linzau.
Linsdale, thank you. How are you guys doing today?
Doing well. Thank you for joining us. What's your
Thank you for
question?
taking the time to do this. I have 3 questions, but I can fire them off pretty quick. You said something about parks, churches, and schools. You scrubbed out certain ones. Where can we find that info? My other question, number 2, is parking. Is there still a waiver if your building's under 3,000 square feet to get around parking? And my 3rd question, you mentioned something about waivers with the Eastern Market people. So is there some form of waivers as far as zoning goes?
So George, I'll let you go first with those.
All right. So in terms of what was purged from the drug-free zone list, that was park lots and greenways, essentially. So there are areas that aren't accessible by members of the public for recreational purposes. So that's what was removed. In terms of
George, I think the question is, you may not have it, and I certainly don't have it in my list of things. I think the gentleman was asking, is there a place that residents can find those locations that were tossed off the list? So
okay.
Yeah, I know that the administration certainly had worked on it. What I would say, Patrick, is make sure that phone number that we gave you for Detroit Means Business, make sure you call and email them. They should be able to provide you with that list. I don't have it because that's not the work that we do. George does not have it either. The administration will have it if you either reach out via email or phone call, and they will get that information for you. George, I'm sorry.
Oh, no worries. In regards to the parking requirement for properties that are under 300 or 3,000 square feet, in our reviews over the past several years, the parking has been required. So I can't say definitively that this allowance of not requiring off-street parking for properties under 3,000 square feet that were built prior to 1998 applies for these facilities. Again, that's a determination that building safety and engineering ultimately makes. So we need to get clarity on that. And I did pose that to my colleagues in the Planning Commission. So hopefully we'll have a definitive response before this call. So I'd like to circle back to that question. And then as it relates to waivers, there is no waiver from spacing whatsoever. It's been a request from members within the Eastern Market area, but no waivers are allowed, no waivers are contemplated. The BZA is not allowed to do spacing waivers either.
All right. Yelena, who's our next caller?
Next up, Terrence Hicks.
Terrence Hicks, thank you for joining us. What's your question, sir?
Hey, yeah, I'll be brief. And the reason that I keep chiming in simply because it is somewhat dizzying, but I'm starting to get a grasp on everything. So I'll be quick. So from my understanding that there's someplace on a website, I'm not sure which one, that actually gives you the sample questions when you do have a hearing review in order to adequately prepare for that. Are you familiar with that, George?
I am not. Our office is not involved in the application review process. So no, I'm sorry.
Okay. What about you, Councilman?
No, sir. We're not involved in it either.
Okay. The other question is, I looked at the map. Now, our property is just east of I-75, and then you had the colored T, so to speak, but it's hard to tell. I don't think it crosses over into where our facility is, but it's just awfully close. So it's hard to gauge there. So I don't know how we get that information so we can change course if we have to.
If you're looking to verify if your property is within a traditional Main Street overlay area, or if there are any other restrictions, if you were to go to that DetroitMeansBusiness.org website, they have a application or a sheet where you can put in your property's parcel number and address, and it will let you know if you're within a prohibited area.
Yeah, Edwina, and thanks for that. She just put something up. And the last quick question is that we are expecting to open at this particular facility. However, someone else has offered us who has a dispensary, and we are secure transporters to co-locate in his facility. Now, is that applicable? I think you said something to that earlier on, or at least a couple of times during this presentation.
I believe that's one of the licenses that is not allowed. You can't have, at least from the licensing perspective, you can't be a licensed provisioning center as well as a licensed transporter. I believe that's one of the state's prohibitions.
Thank you, Terrence. We appreciate you. You got any additional questions? We're going to make sure that that phone number and email is available for Homegrown to help follow up. And George will also make himself available, I'm sure, as he has in the past. Next caller, Yelena.
Joe Duncan.
Joe Duncan, thank you for joining us. You're up next. You have the floor. Joe Duncan, are you there? Joe, I see you're unmuted now. Joe, are you there? All right, we're gonna bring Joe back later on. Yelena, who's our next caller? Because we've got quite a few hands still.
Global Distinctions.
Global Distinctions. Good evening.
Yes. Good evening. How are you, Councilman Tate?
Doing well. Thank you for joining us.
All right. Thank you for having us here and allowing this conversation. It's very important for all of us that are seeking our license in Detroit. We're talking about availability of land, and that's where my question comes in. There is a first come, first serve basis when it comes to the properties. Now, there are only about 17 properties on there and many people looking to get their license. What is the criteria for that first come, first serve? Who determines it? Because, you know, we've all put our applications in almost at the same time. And when the opportunity becomes available to get one of the pieces of 17 properties, it seems like there's going to be a lot of overlap in that type of thing. So how does, what's the criteria and how is that really determined?
Yeah, that wouldn't necessarily be anything that George can answer, and I can't necessarily answer either. The administration is currently working on those, that plan that they're going to, how they're going to execute the awarding of the properties. What I have heard is because there's more than likely going to be a number of applications that are going to be equally weighed, is that there very well may end up being a lottery for those 17 properties, as opposed to an individual making an arbitrary decision on, again, 17 properties. And I just give you all an understanding of how many legacy Detroit we've had thus far. Thus far, we've had 593 legacy applications to date. And this is
earlier.
January 19th.
You went by the store?
Aisha, we can hear you. And on, we've had 213 that have been approved. Again, there's been 593 applications and 213 have been approved thus far. The closeout date is on March 12th, just approaching us in about 4 days or so. You have another question?
No, thank you very much.
All right, thank you so much. Yelena, who do we have next?
We have Dennis Duncan.
Dennis Duncan. Any relation to Joe Duncan?
No relation, sir.
All right, yep, floor is yours, sir.
Thank you, Councilman. Just had a couple questions concerning just the basic qualifications for being a retail business for the cannabis industry. My initial question, and I only really have two, and I promise you they're short and sweet, is if a temporary pop-up business is not permissible, from what I understand from today's call, in what ways is a temporary event license qualify in the city? Because I think that's where I'm a little unclear, because I took that as being an opportunity for pop-up shops and such of that nature, festivals, so on and so forth. So that's my first question. And my second question is, if that is the case and you are required to have a permanent location, and what licenses are required to function as a business, because there's so many and we weren't entirely certain which ones apply for a retail business.
Thank you so much, Mr. Duncan. So George, pop-up shop versus temporary business.
Right. So the license that you're referring to is a marijuana event license, and that's something that is allowed and is licensed by the city. It's different from a temporary pop-up. So with a special event, you're submitting an application to the city of Detroit, to the special event coordinator. That petition then goes to city council, and council has the ultimate say on whether or not that event can take place, as well as the particulars of that. And it goes through a number of departmental reviews. So that's different from, a pop-up shop, like a restaurant trying to, test out a pop-up restaurant or a different venue or something. So those are two different types of licenses or facilities.
All right. Thank you so much.
Does that mean, does that mean that for each event you have to submit an application each time, or if you're approved for a temporary event license, you're covered to submit that application as many times? Like, how does that work exactly?
You have to submit an application for each event. It's not like a annual, you're licensed to be that event coordinator, but for every single event you do, you have to submit a new application.
All right. Thank you. Yelena, who do we have next? Thank you, Mr. Duncan.
Caller ending in 363.
Caller ending in
363.
363. Caller ending in 363. You're on now. Go ahead with your question.
Hello, can you guys hear me?
Yes, sir.
I appreciate everybody for taking the time. My name is Joseph Duncan. I tried to get on before, but there's some technical difficulties, so I apologize for that. My question is simple. So I've been looking at this. Resident Detroiter just got approved for the legacy, and I'm having a real hard time when it comes to trying to find a property that fits the criteria in the ordinance. I think it was discussed before, a lot of the parameters with that 1,000-foot shadow or radial 1,000 feet. I'm running into situations where there just isn't property, and the properties that you can choose from or that are available, they're highly inflated by other individuals that had sourced that years before in the medical industry looking to capitalize, inflated to millions of dollars. And I think my issue is with this program is to give the average Detroiter, myself, an opportunity to get involved in this business. And from what I gather and what I see, that 1,000 feet is it's just too tight in comparison to, what is available, what's actually available in the city, outside of what the city's provided, but just what's available in the city, period. So my question is there going to be, and I know it's been addressed, but I guess just to note, is there going to be any sort of even talk or consideration to opening up or reducing that 1,000-foot to enable more properties to be available to potentially fulfill this program for the Legacy Detroiter, for myself? Thank you.
Yeah, and Mr. Duncan, I appreciate the question. I know it's come up quite a few times, even on this call and even prior to that. Unfortunately, right now, in this first round for sure, there is no contemplation for reducing the zoning restrictions that we have at this point. I certainly will not say that won't be the case moving forward, but as of right now, as we currently sit, there is no contemplation today for that to happen. Potential in the future, but not certainly during this first round of licensing. All right. Yelena, our next call, please.
Our next caller is Marvin.
Marvin, good evening. Thank you for joining us. You have the floor.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, my question is about zoning and recognizing that B4 and other industrial areas seem to be the predominant zoning areas. B3 zones, will they be totally eliminated from the possibility of this activity throughout the process?
Mr. Marvin, thank you for the question. Yes, as it relates to B3, that is strictly a shopping district classification, and it is not being considered. And part and parcel is because we're ultimately doing away with the B3 zoning classification. That's a part of our zoning analytic at this point in our study. We've been in a 2-year process with a consultant and retooling our zoning ordinance. There's not a lot of B3 within the city of Detroit as it now stands. But again, the little bit that we do have is strictly and specifically for shopping and retail purposes, but we are looking to do away with it.
Thank you. Yelena, our next call.
Our next caller is Ray's Poetry.
Ray's Poetry, thank you for joining us. You have
Hey, how are y'all? Thank you for hosting this. My question is just a little more, I was just curious because I kind of overheard the micro business. What did that entail? Was it that there was like 2 different licenses that you could hold under that micro business, or not licenses, but 2 different kind of projects that you could do with cannabis under that?
Thank you, Ray's Poetry. Micro business, it's actually 3 operations that you do under the one micro business license. You have to grow, you have to process, and you have to sell your own. So if you're doing those 3 things, and there's the cap of 150 plants. So again, we are looking to allow those on your B2 and B4 thoroughfares, as well as the other districts where it's permissible. But those are the 3 activities that you as an entity must do. You can't purchase from another grower. You can't purchase from a processor. You can't sell to other entities outside of your micro business's operation.
Thank you. Yelena, who do we have next?
Stephen Carroll.
Stephen Carroll, thank you for joining us. Good evening.
How you doing?
Doing well.
Okay, my question is about the legacy residents. My property is in District 5, Greater Eastern Market Expansion Area. And what's going on now is I'm on the 3rd stage of the Greater Eastern Market Expansion, so there's nothing going to be done in my area right away. But I own a home and I own 5 other lots in the area, and I'm looking to do business from that home. Although it's not my primary residence, but I had this house, it's been in my family since 1933. So would I be considered under the legacy residential class?
Yeah, so I'm not sure. You may be kind of mixing them up. You sounds like you're mixing the licensing and the zoning up together. The licensing, the legacy portion of the licensing ordinance is completely, totally different. And so I would advise you to go to Detroit Means Business /homegrown. Detroit Means Business /homegrown. And it will provide you, DetroitMeansBusiness.com /homegrown, I'm sorry. And that will provide you with the information that you're looking for the legacy. But you want to do that first. They're not mixed together. As a legacy, you have certain benefits, but you have to first go through the legacy application process, certification process. All right.
Yeah, and to see if your property qualifies on that same site, put in that parcel number and it'll let you know if you're in a permissible area with that property.
Correct. All right, Yelena, who do we have next?
We have Lavon.
Lavon, good evening. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having us. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. I've been kind of tracking everything, and I've been on the site looking at all the properties that are owned by the city. everything is pretty much on the east side. And I'm wondering if other properties are going to be added, and are they going to be in other districts that are more on the northwest side, or is this it for Detroit city-owned properties?
Yeah, as of right now, based upon the information that I've gotten from the folks in administration, they've scrubbed the documents to determine if there's any other properties that can be added. What they did was exclude properties that were potentially part of sales or plans of potential sales that are already contemplated and in the works. Other than that, what we see with these 17 properties are the properties that we have available. There, again, may be some properties later on that will become available based on the clearing the title or any other issues, or maybe some other business may close, which will allow some of the properties that the city currently owns to be opened up for a sale and be available for legacy Detroiters. But as of right now, the 17 properties is what has been presented to me as what we have available for properties that the city's own that are zoned currently for cannabis use. All right. What we're going to have to do, we're going to cut off we're going to cut off any new hands, because we still have 24 folks who've raised their hand on Zoom, and we still have a number of questions in the chat as well as on Facebook. So we're cutting off all questions now, and we're going to answer the questions for those who have currently raised their hand on Zoom and on Facebook and enter the chat. So Yelena, no more new questions. Aisha,
Okay.
no more new questions. We're sticking with what we have right now, which is a couple of handfuls. Yelena, we'll come to you next. Who do we have?
Okay, we have Alicia Diaz.
Alicia Diaz, thank you for joining us. Good evening.
I'm unmuted. Good evening, Councilman. Thank you so much. I had a quick question on the conditional uses for B2 and B4, which I understand may allow for microprocessing or on-site consumption. First, is it the zoning code, or where is there a definition of the scope of those conditions about, whether it's allowed or not? And the second question is, what body will make the determination as to whether that conditional use is approved or not? Thank you.
So again, in the zoning ordinance, which can be found on our website, again, if you go to detroitmi.gov, as well as click on Government and City Planning Commission, you can find the zoning ordinance there, or by way of Muni Code, and look up conditional land use. That list of information and what the Building Safety and Engineering Environmental Department look for, that's listed there. Again, it's a special land use hearing which takes place, and it's a special land use hearing officer who ultimately makes the decision. Those hearings typically take place on either Wednesdays or Thursdays, and a decision is typically rendered about 30 days after that hearing.
All right, thank you. Yelena, who's our next caller?
Danielle Adams.
Danielle Adams, excuse me. Thank you for joining us. The floor is yours. Ms. Adams, are you there? All right, let's cycle Ms. Adams and put her back at the end of the queue. Let's go to our next caller. Oh,
can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you now. There we go. Yes,
okay, sorry about that. Yes, my name is Danielle Adams. Are you able to hear me?
Yes.
Again, Danielle Adams. Hi, everyone, Councilman. I am a graduate of BCA, Black Cannabis Access, and I am currently in the process of applying for licenses. And I'm new to the process and everything going on. However, I have a question about the zoning where you mentioned the conditional zoning for consumption establishments. If you're 300 feet, it requires a hearing from everyone within a 300 foot radius. Is that correct?
Yes, so that's for all conditional land uses within the city of Detroit. Anybody that's applying for any conditional land use, they are required to have a hearing before the Building Safety and Engineering and Environmental Department. And a notice is sent out to every property owner, occupant, and resident within 300 radial feet of that property. So they have an opportunity to weigh in on the request.
So just an addendum to that, there is also an element in the licensing portion of the adult use ordinance that indicated if you are looking to set up a facility, part of our outreach and engagement portion indicates that the Department of Neighborhoods, whatever district that facility is located in, they have to send out notification to everyone in that district on their mailing list. And so it will be, the City Planning Commission and all those folks will certainly cast a 300-foot radius, but the Department of Neighborhoods, by our ordinance, shall send out to everyone they have in their mailing list within that particular district information about the land use hearing. All right. Yelena, next caller.
Peter Rhodes.
Peter Rhodes, thank you for joining us. Floor is yours, sir.
Yes, can you hear me, sir?
We can.
All right. Well, we've talked before, and I've talked to George, and Green Acres Woodward Civic Association is very concerned about the overconcentration of marijuana facilities on 8 Mile. We've been asking for overlay zoning for 2.5 years. We know that there is already a major corridor overlay zoning overlay for 8 Mile Road, and yet nothing's been done. Is anything going to be done?
Yeah, there's no plans at this point, Peter, as I've mentioned to you several times in every conversation I've had with you, there's no appetite at all to make 8 Mile Road, the entirety of 8 Mile Road, which you've asked for, to be an overlay, a traditional Main Street overlay. There's no desire, not just from me, but from the entire council. So that has not changed. It remains the same. Just want to, I guess, give that information to you again. As I mentioned to you, I think it's important to make sure if that's what you're looking for, to build a coalition all the way from the east side to the west side of individuals, entities, organizations that are interested in the same thing you're looking for. But right now, there's just hasn't been the desire and the outroar that I guess apparently you're hearing. We have not received it. So again, thank you for your engagement. Next caller, Yelena.
Councilman, I do apologize if I butchered this name. The last name is Noir.
All right. LaCorn Noir. And I apologize if I mispronounced it. I'm going to try.
It is LaCorn Noir.
All right.
You're right, Councilman Tate.
Good evening. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Actually, my name is Angela Moore. I live over here on Beaverland. We're very well acquainted.
Yes, ma'am.
And
I know that name.
I know you do. I know you do. I sent you an email, I think last week, and I also called your office, and someone else called me about my concerns as far as our zoning and saying that I needed to go over to CRIO, C-R-I-O.
Well, just tell us what's the. I didn't see the email. I'll be honest with you. What's the issue while we're here? Because George
okay, well,
answered as well.
The issue is that I sent you the email in concern with the fact that I've been, well, of course, I'm a Detroit legacy, and I've seen those 17 properties, and it was astonishing because I couldn't believe that it would only be 17 properties. The fact that we have to do a social equity compliance for the program itself, and I mean for our communities, and we're not in our communities, we're not able to set up and have property in our community, buy property in our community from the city. That's more of my concern because I live in District 1, and District 1 has more problems than just a marijuana facility popping up. You know, we're dealing with a lot of issues. So I just want to know, what can we do to make sure that we're able to have property in District 1?
Yeah, so I'm not going to try to lead you on and take you down a road that's not legitimate and real. As I mentioned before, the city of Detroit, the properties that are currently on there that's been provided to us are the properties that have been zoned for cannabis use. And I totally understand and get when you say there's more on the east side and not on the west side, but there was no desire or attempt to find an equal amount on the east side, west side, or even in each district. The desire was to find as many properties as we could citywide. And that's how it ended up in terms of the zoning. As you know, there's a number of spaces. We have a number of properties in the city of Detroit that we own, but many of these properties are not zoned in areas that are allowable for cannabis use. And so that's the situation that we have right now. It was not to try to balance out the districts. It was to try to find as many properties as we can. And I've, again, instructed the departments to go back and scrub. I've talked to the mayor to go back and scrub all of our data to see if there's some additional properties that we can acquire to make available for applicants. But there are a number of cities that don't even provide any of this. So that was when we contemplated when we started drafting this ordinance, how do we get additional benefit for Detroiters in what is already a very challenging situation? And what we have, I was hopeful that we would have certainly more than 17 properties, but right now that's what we have available. George?
Just got a response from my colleagues in the Planning Commission as it relates to the off-street parking requirement. So, and this ties nicely into the conversation about available properties. So if you have a commercial property and it's 3,000 square feet or less and built prior to 1998, you don't have to provide that additional off-street parking. So that 1 per 200 square feet, or the 2 per 3 employees, or 1 per 800 square feet, provided that it's less than 3,000 square feet and built prior to 1998, no additional off-street parking is required.
Thank you. Aisha, let's bounce over to Facebook now. I know we've got some questions over there. What question do we have? What's our first question on Facebook?
Our first question on Facebook is from Oliver Cole. He asks, how does the good neighbor policy work? How do communities make sure it's enforced and money collected then distributed to the community? Question mark.
Yeah, the good neighbor plan is part of the licensing portion of the adult use ordinance. Long story short, and we won't go into it because we got a number of people who have their hands for zoning. Long story short, it's an agreement between a adult use marijuana establishment and a community that the facility is located in to provide more benefit than just the existence of the facility within that particular neighborhood. It's terms that are agreed upon the applicant and the community association or neighborhood that the facility is located in. All right, next question, Aisha, on Facebook.
From Matthew Abel, who asks, is there a written definition of parkway and park lot?
George, we'll throw that one to you.
Absolutely. The written definition of parkway and park lot can be found in the City of Detroit's recreational master plan. And again, that's where that determination was made. So, and that document should be available on the city's website, detroitmi.gov. If you were to click on departments and recreation, it should be a searchable document.
All right, and I just want to let everybody know that this video is not going to go anywhere. We're going to make sure that it remains available on Facebook as well after today. Aisha, looks like we only had a few from you, so let's go ahead and clean up Facebook. What's our next caller? Next question, I'm sorry.
Pam Weinstein asks, what is the reasoning behind allowing microprocessors and consumption establishments in B2 and B4? Saying that special land use hearings will be required is not much protection for residents who live very close to businesses in their neighborhoods.
George.
All right, so as it relates to consumption establishments and micro businesses, the thought again behind those facilities was to allow them within the city of Detroit by limiting micro businesses to industrial areas, again, that would be cost prohibitive for many of the smaller operations. Again, both uses are limited in terms of licenses. So that's 35 for consumption and 35 for micro business is what's in the licensing ordinance. And again, they still have to meet all of the spacing requirements as well. So 1,000 feet from your sensitive uses, 1,000 feet from drug-free zones, in addition to having the conditional land use hearing. Having sat on the previous licensing review committee for these facilities over the past 2 years, there have been many a well-organized community association which has scuttled plans, well-laid plans by millionaire investors within our various neighborhoods throughout the city of Detroit. So the conditional land use hearing is definitely a tool utilized by well-organized community associations.
Aisha, what's the next question on Facebook?
Another question from Matthew Abel. What is the reasoning behind requiring a consumption establishment to be 1,000 feet from a cannabis retailer or a micro business?
So in that regard, they are similar uses. I'm assuming that a consumption establishment very well may have a component in which they are providing consumption or cannabis to their clientele within that premises. The distribution as well as the consumption are, kind of in tandem. So that's why that spacing requirement from similar and or like uses is written into the ordinance.
Okay. Aisha, this is our last question, it sounds like.
Yes. Andrew Simmons, I'm going to try my best to decipher his comment, but it says, with the requirements to send a letter to properties within 300 feet of a proposed location, does that only apply to the properties located in the city of Detroit within 300 feet of the proposed location, or also properties potentially in other municipalities who are within 300 feet of the proposed Detroit location?
George?
I know for master plan amendments and or rezonings, when we do the notice of 300 feet, we do go across jurisdictional lines. I don't want to make an assumption that building safety and engineering does the same thing. I believe that they might, but again, I will reach out to someone and see if I can get clarity on that as well.
All right, so it sounds like we've cleared the questions on Facebook. So Yelena, we're going to go now to you on Zoom. Who's our next caller?
Galaxy S10e.
Galaxy S10e, good evening. Thank you for joining us. The floor is yours.
Evening, this afternoon or this evening. I was just calling. I got a lot of information on the micro business that from a lot of the other questions. Basically now, as far as those locations, are those set up on a map area on the website where I can start looking at those and seeing what might be available or whatnot, or what areas it may be available?
Yeah, if you have a parcel that you're looking for in particular, so there's no map that says we don't have it available right now online, what's available, what's not available. What we did was try to make it a little more easier for you. If you have a parcel that you're interested in, you can go on the DetroitMeansBusiness.com/homegrown website, and you can plug in that parcel to identify if where you're looking for is in fact a location that is zoned for cannabis use. Yelena, next caller.
Ace Boogie.
Ace Boogie, you're up next.
Good evening, Councilman. Thank you for taking my call. I got a couple quick questions for you. Is one, I just want to clarify, the BZA cannot give any waivers for any spacing, correct?
Correct.
Okay, now let me ask you this, just real quick. If I found a facility for a provisioning center and right on the other side of the parking lot is another building that I would like to do a consumption lounge, even though I'm within 1,000 feet of myself, would that be prohibited?
That is also prohibited.
So I couldn't even be within 1,000 feet of myself?
No, sir.
Okay, and then what about if I found a building, but it has a church and a school in like a different city?
The school itself casts a 1,000-foot drug-free zone. The church does not.
And again, for clarity, the school drug-free zone is federal. That's not local. We can't adjust that one at all. All right, Yelena, who's next?
Jones.
Jones, good evening. Thank you for joining us.
Good evening. Thanks for having us. I know we've touched on zoning waivers once or twice, and I just want to make sure that I'm clear on the point. If for instance, I have a piece of property and a small fraction of it falls within that 1,000-foot shadow, is there still no room or no avenue by which I could get some sort of waiver or variance, or even if that fraction is not really usable? Is there anything for that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, it's come up before, George, about splitting properties. That's kind of what it's called. Is that possible under the scenario we have?
So if you were to try to keep your parcel whole, there's no waiver that's available. However, if you were to go to the city assessors and split your parcel, lobbing off that portion that's not used, then yes, that is permissible.
Now, how challenging is that? Because there's some folks who are listening right now that you probably pick their ears up and you want to rush down to the assessor's office. How challenging is that, and what are some consequences, if you will, of splitting your parcel?
You're definitely going to get 2 tax bills. You have to be cognizant and make sure that you pay both. As we've seen recently, you fall behind on one of those bills, then that portion of property is going to go into foreclosure. So that's definitely a pitfall of splitting a parcel, making sure that you stay up on that and making sure those property taxes are paid.
All right, thank you. Yelena, who do we have next?
Spencer Pence.
Spencer Pence, thank you for joining us. The floor is yours. Are you there, Spencer? Spencer, I see you removed the mute. Are you there? All right, Elaine, let's put Spencer at the end of the queue. We'll bring him back up at the end. Next caller.
Bobby Whetstone.
Bobby Whetstone?
Yes, this is me. Hello?
Yep, you're here. We can hear you. Good evening.
Oh, good evening. I have a property that's in the M zone. However, when you do radio from a drug-free zone, I'm 193 feet short. But if you do lineal going to that location, I'm 1,056 feet. And I'm wondering, will the verbiage be changed, whereas the radio versus lineal measuring, will that be something that will be considered later, maybe?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Whetstone. Unfortunately, radial feet is the law of the land. We will not consider going with the lineal measurement, at least not for a particular use. So that actually came up back in 2015 when we were considering spacing for medical marijuana facilities. But radial measurement is the common practice used when zoning land and siting land. So that's what we're sticking with.
So, and again, I know some folks may say it seems real simple. All you got to do is make a change. If we were to make a change to linear for adult use, would it be the only use that we have linear for versus radio?
That would be the case.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Yelena, who's our next caller?
Chiffon Jackson.
Chiffon Jackson, thank you for joining us. Good evening. Chiffon Jackson, are you there? Chiffon, I see you took the mute off. Are you there? All right. We'll put Ms. Jackson, we'll put Chiffon Jackson back at the end of the queue. Yelena, we'll make sure we get back to Spencer and Chiffon. Who's our next caller?
Okay, Diane Hunter.
Diane Hunter. Good evening. Thank you for joining us. You have a question?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, sir. I've given up. I have a question about the traditional Main Street.
Oh, you just went back on mute, Miss Hunter.
No, I accidentally muted her. 1 second.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
Okay, no problem. I had a question about the traditional main streets and the thoroughfares. I really didn't follow. The purple line is what?
So the purple line, I'm sorry, yes,
Go
Ms.
ahead.
Hunter. The purple line is what was newly added in terms of traditional Main Street overlays. So back in 2020, council expanded and or added new traditional Main Street overlays. I'm primarily trying to spur development in these particular corridors. So the purple again indicates what was newly added, and the orange is what was previously existing.
Okay, so the purple line, if I remember correctly, on Warren, it starts and then it stops abruptly. So that means a portion of Warren is okay, or does it mean none of Warren is okay?
You're on mute, George.
Thank you, sir. On from Southfield to Greenfield on West Warren, that's the newly established traditional Main Street overlay area. So if you were to go west of Southfield Freeway, that would be permissible. However, again, between Southfield Freeway and Greenfield Road, that's the traditional Main Street overlay.
All right, thank you. Yelena, who's our next caller?
McClendon Starks.
McClendon Starks, thank you for joining us. Good evening.
Good evening. How are you?
Doing well. Yourself?
I can't complain. So I'm just trying. The question that just was brought up kind of answers, but I'm confused. I have a building on St. Mary's in Grand River, and when I looked at the map, it looked like it had a purple line around it. I wasn't quite sure, so I was just trying to find out if you guys could give me clarity, or is there a department I have to talk to? Because it is across the street from a church, but there's some like land in front of the church also. So I was just trying to find out if the building was available to do anything.
Yeah, so I'll give you a short answer. You absolutely want to go on that website. I ask again, make sure if you have a building that you are trying to identify if it is zoned for cannabis use, you go on the DetroitMeansBusiness.com/homegrown website, and it will provide you with information to determine if your building is located in an area where it is zoned for cannabis use. That's the short answer. George, you got some longer.
Yeah, the church, St. Mary's Church, located right there at Grand River and St. Mary's, does cast a 1,000-foot shadow. The CMA High School that's located behind the St. Mary's Church on St. Mary's casts a 1,000-foot shadow. And you are within a traditional Main Street overlay. Again, that Grand River overlay goes from Berg Road all the way to Greenfield on Grand River. So from Greenfield all the way to Berg Road, that is traditional Main Street overlay. So if you are on Grand River or abutting a property on Grand River, you are not allowed to locate a marijuana related use.
All right. You know what, y'all? I have messed up that website so many times this evening. It's actually DetroitMeansBusiness.org, not com. DetroitMeansBusiness.org/homegrown. As mentioned, we will definitely make sure that that website is on at the very end of this forum as well. So be patient. But again, DetroitMeansBusiness.org/homegrown. Yelena, who's our next caller?
Galaxy Tab A.
Galaxy Tab A. Thank you for joining us. Good evening. The floor is yours. Galaxy Tab A, are you there? Galaxy Tab A. All right. All right. It sounds like we got a third caller in the queue. We'll bring up at the end. Yelena, who's next?
Amy Z.
Hello.
Amy Z, thank you for joining us.
Hi, dear Councilman, and also planning planner. I'm a planning folks and also study transportation in Wayne State. I want to express some of my thoughts regarding zoning and the location selection. It's a little bit different as other people's perspective, because most of them, I think most of them are concerned about the open business. I just want to our planning department to consider this thing all comprehensively, consider different perspectives. So in brief, I think this marijuana business has a high risk, maybe get sunshine business and get some good future for our city. On the other side, there's something I think we need to be aware of. The thing is not a rare product, and it can grow as more and more quantity, then the value is dropping more. So it could be when you allowing more business, then it might be cheap as a potato someday when you have so many people can grow. And on the other hand, the grow process, you combine that with a single facility, within single facility, from the growing, producing until sell into a single utility, then it will have some difficulty for management or supervision for how many eventually produced and how much eventually sell. That is taxable. So people could say, oh, we grow 150, but it doesn't grow very well. So I didn't sell that much eventually, or over the winter I didn't sell.
Amy, I'm sorry, we still have a number of hands that are raised. Do you have a question at all that you want to?
Yeah. I think I suggested that you separate the categories that of all the registrations, all the categories of the marijuana business into separate zoning. So for example, so you in the neighborhood, you're just using the B zoning, and there are a lot of high vacancy area that you can just assign that as a wholesale or producing area. And the planting, it can be just categorized separately. So you can actually cooperate with a university that you can also at the same way to attract the research and the funding for the university. So at the same time, that value for the city will be rise up more when when the institute can have the chance to do the research with the extra produce that didn't sell at the end.
All right,
so,
thank you.
Yeah, that's what I think may be better. Otherwise, if you put all the categories in single utilities and you separate them into 150 or 230 different locations, each of single process for your registration or approve permit, you will cost 150 times to process in the city. Instead, if you have a single large area that just for produce, you can control how much you really produce and also can renovate the products so that you can be more competitive and to sell the other states, which is our potential more market area.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Amy. Our next caller, Yelena.
Our next caller is Galaxy S20.
Galaxy S20 Ultra 5G. Floor is yours. Good evening.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Just trying to clear up a little confusion, maybe. I know you guys say you only have like 17 properties that just offer for just the legacy applicants, and are there other properties that if I go out on my own and find a property that I can use, is that applicable to what we're trying to do?
Yes, the properties that are on the website are only available to legacy Detroiters. And yes, if you're able to find a property that is properly zoned for the use that you're looking to license, you absolutely will be able to get your facility license at that location.
Okay, and the other question is that, like, I guess what a lot of people been having a problem. I've been around all over the city, man. It seems like there's really nothing out there for everybody, and when you do find something, it's out of the zone. Is there any way you guys are rezoning some of these properties? Like if I find something I see that may be suitable, would you guys come out and say, yes, you can use it, or no? How would that work?
Yeah, right now, and I know I sound like a broken record, there is no contemplation at this point to reduce the zoning restrictions of 1,000 feet on those items. Those areas that cause restrictions, the churches, the liquor stores, the schools, as well as the parks. There's no anticipation at this point, certainly during the first round of licensing, for that to take place. Next caller, Yelena.
Christopher Zamora.
Christopher Zamora, thank you for joining us.
Good evening, gentlemen. I want to thank you for your time, as well as your admins are doing an awesome job in the chat box. Mr. Etheridge, this is probably something you can answer better. There's a property located with an M4 zoning. It falls on, I'm looking at the map, half the across the street is in the blue zone, but this particular part of the block has a yellow overlay. There is a city park that is other side of the railroad track and also other industry. Is that 1,000 feet measured from what point? Does it give any type of consideration to separation, or how would that be affected?
There's no consideration given to separation. Again, it's radial measurement, and it's from parcel line to parcel line. So even if there's train tracks, industry, something in between a sensitive use and your particular property, that 1,000-foot spacing buffer still applies.
All right. Elena, who is our next caller?
Our next caller is Felicia Pickett.
Felicia Pickett, thank you for joining us. Good evening. You have a question? Felicia Pickett, are you there? I see you taking off the mute. Felicia?
Yes. I thank you so much for this opportunity to address this meeting. My name is Felicia Pickett. I am in full support of the growth of the legacy programs and opportunity the city is offering. I thank you for that. I am requesting that the ordinance or zoning be reviewed or reconsidered. I ask that the ordinances be adjusted to the restricted land use of marijuana businesses to 0 feet and to adhere to the drug-free zone restrictions, or that it be adjusted to the same level as the liquor stores, which is 500 feet currently. With the current limitations of 1,000 feet from religious institutions and other controlled entities, the current zoning rules restricts and limits the opportunities for Detroiters in this field to further restrict it, instead of gaining access to purchase viable properties to service these viable neighborhoods who are interested in receiving the benefits that these businesses will bring, such as jobs, economic support, and development for the future and beyond. On consideration of the consumption lounges, a consumption lounge does not have the ability to provide or sell marijuana. It is just a consumption lounge. So the 1,000 feet restriction alters or can stop the business of that particular business of allowing the opportunity for others to get consumables to you while you're at a consumption lounge or near a consumption lounge. If it's more than 1,000 feet away, that means that these two businesses are not supporting each other and cannot support local consumption lounges who cannot provide marijuana to consume in that particular vicinity. Again, I thank you and have a good day.
Thank you. We will definitely take it under advisement, though. Thank you. Yelena, next caller.
We have Donna MC.
Donna MC, thank you for joining us. Good evening.
Well, good evening. Thank you both. I really appreciate all the avenues that we can ask questions. I have a couple of questions. One is, the establishments that have the consumers or the clients, when they participate as far as having an avenue to come into the place and when they go back outside of the unit, we're talking about in reference to the smell that the marijuana do produce. And I'm asking, are there guidelines in which the owner are responsible for that? Do they have the ability to say you cannot be around this establishment? Do they supposed to leave? Or what are the guidelines in reference to that?
George, I don't think, is there anything in zoning that touches on that? I want to.
There's nothing in zoning. I know that in the licensing ordinance, there are provisions about air scrubbers.
Yeah, so they've got to make sure every applicant has to have their business plan as well as any nuisance plan, how to address nuisance, and one of those nuisance potentially can be noise or smell, and they have to address how they're going to handle those potential situations, not just with the city but with the state. That's part of their licensing plan that has to go to the state as well as the city. If you have, if I'm not sure we answered your question thoroughly, Donna MC, you can certainly reach out to us in our email or on our phone, and we'll do our best to answer that question. I'm not sure if I answered it fully. Yelena, our next call, please.
Ray.
Ray, good evening. Thank you for joining us. You have a question?
Hi, good evening.
Good evening, Ray.
Hi.
Ray, can you turn off one of your devices? You may have a phone and your computer on at the same time.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, I had two questions. One, does the 1,000 feet shadow cast up? Like, could we consider a location in a high-rise facility if it's beyond 1,000 feet from another entity that is not allowed? And my second question is, I'm from, my organization is called City Labs with Black Cannabis Access, and we are opening up a testing and compliance laboratory, and we are wondering, could we co-locate with other cannabis entities?
All right. Thank you for those two questions, Ray. So George, the distance requirement, does it go up as well as out?
Right. So it primarily goes out. So as you indicated, or the caller indicated, if they're in the sky rise, if there's a commercial property on the ground floor and you're in an office building or something and you're up over 1,000 feet, would that qualify? Unfortunately not. So if it were a commercial property, we do allow for vertical integration. But again, if you're selling, then that 1,000-foot buffer applies. If you're growing, processing, doing safety compliance, then there is no spacing requirement, and there could be that vertical integration, and multiple licensees could be in a skyrise building. I know that there was a request for some applicants in the Fisher building at one point in time. As it relates to, can a processor, or rather a safety compliance, co-locate with a number of other licensees? I know that a processor can't hold a license and for any of the others, because you can't test your own, you can't process, as a safety compliance, you can't test what you grow, you have to test others. I don't know if there's a locational prohibition on them sharing space, as long as you are your own licensee and your own individual entity. And doing the review, the state law requires that each individual licensed facility be separated and has its own dedicated entrance. So as long as you can meet those parameters, I don't see there being a prohibition.
All right. Yelena, it sounds like we have two more questions, two more hands raised.
Yes, sir. We have James and Kelly.
James and Kelly. Thank you for joining us. Good evening.
Okay, slight issue. They're using a version of Zoom that I have to promote them to panelists for them to ask their question.
Okay. James and Kelly.
Hello, Councilman.
Hello.
Thank you for having this meeting tonight. The first question that we had was about the liquor stores being within 500 feet. They only have to be within 500 feet of one another. So we're also asking to allow that. That will free up some of the property. Also, another question that we had was if we purchase a building and someone else purchases a building, we're right within 1,000 feet of one another. Neither one of us have received a license. How will it be determined who's approved? Will we both get approved, or because neither one of us knows that the other has purchased the building, but we're both within 1,000 feet?
Yeah, that would not fall under George in terms of you're talking about the license, it sounds like, right?
Well, it is zoning because it's within 1,000 feet of one another.
Right, but it sounds like both of you are equal though, correct? Both applicants, you and the other are equal, correct?
That's correct, yes.
Okay, George, I see you took off your mute. I'll let you go ahead and take a
I was
stab.
going to say the common practice has been first come, first serve. So whoever gets licensed first would then cast the 1,000-foot shadow, knocking the other out of consideration.
Okay, I have one other quick question. If I'm in an M zone industrial for provisioning, do I have to still meet the requirement of 1,000 feet from another provisioning center and liquor stores?
Yes, you do.
All right. Thank you. Elena, who's our next caller?
We have the two people that we were trying to hear before, Chiffon Jackson.
Chiffon Jackson, are you still here? Chiffon Jackson? Uh-oh, we kind of heard something. Let's try it again.
So can you hear me?
Now we can, yes.
I'm here, Mr. Okay. So my question was, I've been trying to, I've gotten my affidavit and I've done, applied with the state, but I can't, there's nowhere to upload the supporting document and along with my affidavit and application for the legacy. I'm having problems and I know I got to get it in by the 12th.
Yep.
It's already been notarized.
So Ms. Jackson, we're going to put
any other way I can?
No, everything must go through the it must go through the channels that you've been provided. But we've provided you and going to give you everyone at the end of this forum phone number, a brand new line that's going to open up tomorrow, a brand new hotline for those who have questions, as well as making sure that you can email the homegrown team to get your questions asked as well. And so we're going to make sure that information is provided at the end of this particular meeting, but no, that is the only way. What you've been provided thus far is the only way to provide your information to CREO. All right, Yelena, I think we have one more.
Yes, Spencer Pence.
All right, Spencer Pence, are you still there? So we're taking off of mute. Mr. Spence, are you there? Pence, are you there? All right, we're gonna have to give you one more chance and then we're gonna wrap up. Mr. Pence, are you there?
Hello.
Oh, I think I hear.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we hear you now. And now we don't.
Yes. Okay, good evening. Thank you.
Mr. Pence, I'm sorry, you're breaking up really badly.
Consideration for those building the
Mr. Pence.
Yeah.
Yeah, Mr. Pence, I'm sorry. We're going to have to connect with you later on in some other way. We could not hear you. Were very digitized, your voice was. And so again, you can certainly reach out to us. I would say though, your best bet, if it's a question based upon zoning or anything regarding adult use, reach out to the phone number and the email that we're going to put up on the screen at the end of this particular meeting. I just want to make sure that we've had as many questions as we can get answered this evening based upon the time, because we do appreciate your time and we want to honor it as well. Yelena, is that our last caller?
Yes, sir.
All right. Did we have any questions in the chat that we were not able to answer?
I know Edwina was answering a lot of questions in the chat. Edwina?
Yeah.
Councilman, hold on. Yes, so most of the questions have been answered in the chat as far as links being provided. In addition, contact information.
Okay. Well, I appreciate it. So what we're going to do, folks, we're going to wrap up this evening. We only had it slated for 6 until 7:30. It's now 8 o'clock. Again, I want to thank everyone for joining us today. We're going to have the public hearing that's going to take place on the 11th. This was a sneak preview for those who have not been privy to the information. Reggie, can you please put up the slide that you created for the public hearing that's going to take place on the 11th? All right, this is the slide. So we got a time now. 10:05 a.m. on March 11th is the public hearing. What happens in that particular meeting will then be forwarded to the full city council the following Tuesday for a final vote. So just wanted to give you all a timeline on where things are. The next, and I would say next and certainly most important aspect of the zoning portion of the ordinance will take place in a few days, March 11th at 10:05 a.m. the public hearing. You see the information there on the screen on how to join city council and provide your comments. And then the following Tuesday, that's next Tuesday, it should come before the full body for a vote. All right, Reg, can you also put up the phone number or the contact information for Detroit Means Business? Yeah, folks, that's the website, and it's actually correct this time, not incorrect like I kept saying, the correct website, as well as the email address and the new telephone helpline that's going to open first thing tomorrow. So that is the phone number for Detroit Means Business Homegrown. Mr. Etheridge, any last words that you want to offer the audience regarding this process?
For those of you that are able, please join us again on Thursday at 10:05 a.m. Via Zoom, where once again we'll go through this presentation and hear from the members of the public and hopefully answer your questions.
All right. And I just want to again, thank you again for your time as well, George. Thank you. And I neglected to mention it in the last form that we did. This is a lot of work, and the team has done a tremendous job today in gathering all the resources. And as one of the callers mentioned, we are making sure that we keep everything as open, as many different avenues to engage, whether Zoom, Facebook, emails, people sent those as well. But we want to continue to be as responsive as possible. So again, thank you for joining us this evening. This now wraps up our zoning town hall regarding zoning for adult use. Thank you all, and hopefully see or hear from you on Thursday. You all take care. Be safe and be well. Thank you to my team. Great job. Great job.